Okay. This will start with the murder of the Hodges family. Now, the Hodges family had a farm in Bullock County, Georgia, living about 6 miles from Statesboro, the county seat. It burned down on Thursday, July 26, 1904. The next day, the bodies of Hodges' wife, Claudia, their 1-year-old daughter, Kitty, Corrine, the 2-year-old son, Harmon, and 6-month-old son, Talmadge, were all found in the ruins. Even with the house still burning, neighbors who arrived during the night discovered Hodges' hat, signs of a struggle, and puddles of blood, just a short distance from the house. In the morning, footprints of 4 men, one of whom were barefoot, were found around the house. Dogs were brought, but they were unsuccessful in finding anything. 2 shoes were found nearby, and somebody recognized the shoe and identified it as one of the farmhands, Paul Reed. A knife, also identified as belonging to Reed, was found nearby. Several strands of hair believed to have been from Claudia Hodges were stuck in the heel of one shoe. The next day, a group of men from the area searched Reed's home, and the unofficial posse found shoes matching the ones found near the home. So what they did is they brought in Reed's wife. Now, Harriet Reed was a black woman in a very strong southern town and had little respect from the police and was in danger at any time if she didn't say what they said. But she gave a statement to the sheriff and contained contradictions and unverified claims. But she implicated her husband and her neighbor, Will Cato, on the murders of Hodges. By her account, her husband and Cato believed that Hodges had buried money behind his chicken coop. The 2 men had gone to the Hodges farm on the preceding Saturday night to dig for the money, but had been discovered. They were able to convince Hodge that they were just passing by on the way to a store when a snake had grazed Kane, who had been seeking to put it out of its wound. She further said that her husband and Cato were returned to the Hodges farm on Thursday night again, searched for their buried money, but had once again been discovered by Hodges. He struggled with the would-be robbers, and his wife, Claudia, came to his aid. Both Henry and Claudia Hodges were killed by Reed and Cato. The men then moved the bodies into the house and fled. Later that night, Reed and Kane returned to the farm, intending to search the house for money and then to burn it in order to destroy evidence of the murders. They discovered the 9-year-old Kitty Corrine hiding in the house and killed her. Harriet Reed's statement included the detail that her Kitty Corrine had offered to give a nickel to Reed and Kane if they would spare her life. After killing the girl, the 2 men spread kerosene around the house and set it on fire, leaving the 2 young boys unable to get out. Now, of course, the story was sensationalized, and the word of her story had spread through the community. 15 African-American men were brought to the sheriff's office for questioning, but public opinion focused on Reed and Cato. Regional newspapers, the Savannah Morning News and the Augusta Chronicle, presented sensational accounts. As it was just, trying to make money and stir up the hatred. They claimed that the flames concealed the darker crime and that a nameless offense had been committed, implying that both Claudia and Kitty Corrine had been raped. This invoked the Southern white image of African-American rapist beast. In the last years of the 19th century, Southern whites were being told that African American men were increasingly raping white women, and that African American men born since emancipation were potential rapists. Jim Crow laws and lynchings were common. Reed and Kane were also associated with the turpentine industry, a major employee at the Bullitt County. Although Reed was a tenant farmer and Kane a farm laborer at the time, they had previously worked in the turpentine store. Need for seasonal laborers in turpentine camps attached young African workers from outside of the county. Many whites considered the illiterate workers in those camps to be shiftless and disruptive. So they were, not only did they have problems with their self and their color, they also were transients. There was talking of in Statesboro of the lynching of them, and the sheriff moves to the jails in Savannah. After being moved to Savannah, Reed made a statement admitting to being a lookout for John Hall and Sankey Tolbert, both of whom worked for a company in Statesboro. Reed said that Hall had planned the robbery and murder. Reed also said that Cato had not been involved in the crime. After a few days, Reed changed his story, saying it had been a lookout and that Will Rooney and Cato had committed the crime. Now, you got to understand, they were probably brutalized the whole time they were in jail. He next blamed the crimes on the Before Day Club, a group of African Americans dedicated to robbing and killing whites. This time, Reed said that he and Cato committed the crime while Dan Young served as a lookout. At trial, he changed his story again, claiming that they had been served as lookout and that murders were committed by Cato, Hall, Rainey, Henny Bull, and the kid. All the stop participants, and just went on. The trial, well, they did try to make it an honorary trial. It was very prejudiced, and the coroner's jury met on the 1st and 2nd of August. It was taken from Harriet Reed and a fellow Cairo, Will's wife, and from neighbors who had helped investigate the murders. The jury indicted Paul Reed and Will Kane, but released most of the other suspects. Harriet Reed, Ophia Cato, and Handy Bell were held as witnesses. Many people in the white community felt that Bell should also have been indicted. With calls from the public for an immediate trial, Superior Court Judge Alexander Daly set August 15th, 1904 for a trial date. Now, that means that they only had 19 days, okay? The Statesboro News called for hanging the devils in public. It was just terrible. They called out the troops to try to control him. And this is the description of what happened to them as said by the newspapers. The date is August 17th, 1904. The place in Georgia, State Shore. It's done by the Daily Graphic. And it has front page, Georgia Negroes burned at stake. They deal swift punishment to Negroes after legal conviction. Now, this is not good. State Shore, Georgia, August 17th, with clothing saturated with kerosene, writhing and twisting in agony, screaming to heaven for mercy that the mob would not show. Paul Reed and William Cato, Negroes, two of the principals in the dastardly murder and burning of Henry Hodges and wife, and three of their children, 6 miles from Statesboro. 3 weeks ago were burned at the stake today. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. In the trial of Reed, little delay was caused, and upon its conclusion, the prisoners, as before, were hustled into the witness room where a strong guard of militia was mounted over them. In the corridors of the agitation began. The spectators left the courtroom, and from the lawn outside, many entered the hallway. Shortly before 10 o'clock, the crowd was addressed by a tall man who seemed to influence it greatly. He called on those about him to follow him. Then Captain Hitch, the Northrop Light Infantry, who was in command of the force, realized that the situation was desperate. He posted guards on each of the stairways that led to the floor above, where the prisoners were confined. With fixed bayonets but unloaded rifles, the guards stood. The mob surged toward them, but was repulsed several times. A commotion at the front door drew the crowd there. There was but temporarily. Presently, they were back at the rear, and some 25 men crowded around the guards. Before they could be prevented, they had caught two of the guards, wrested their weapons from them, and threw open the breech locks. The weapons were empty, and that was what the crowd wanted to ascertain. The troops had been given orders not to load their rifles. The captured soldiers were held prisoner, while the same policy was followed with others of the soldiers. Cato begged to be hanged or shot. Cato begged to be shot or hanged, saying he was innocent and that he had no part in the crime. Some of the more humane among them wanted to grant his request, but they were in the minority. The rest wanted to visit the same death upon the Negroes that had visited upon the Hodge family. Reed was taken down the stairway with a rope around his neck, and Cato down the other, both pleading for their lives. The crowd now numbered over 700. Shouting, they dragged the men along the road, leading to the Hodges homestead, where the 5 members of the family had been murdered and burned. The spectacle was frightful. As the flames leapt about Reed's naked body with oil-soaked skin, he twisted his head around in an endeavor to choke himself and avoid the fearful torture. Only once did he complain. He said, "Lord, have mercy." Cato screamed in agony and begged that he be shot. With heavy hair, which was oft soaked with kerosene, was almost the first thing the flames fastened onto. He writhed in agony and had a rope become a collar around his neck. A thrill of horror ran through the frames of the more timid. Before the flames had quenched Cato's life, the rope was burned in two, and his head swung from side to side as he endeavored to avoid the fiery tongue of the flames. By effort almost superhuman, he writhed under the close-locked chains. For only about 3 minutes he was visible to the crowd before the great pile of faggots made a wall of flame, which the wind swept around on Cato's side and hid him from view.